Testle Dr. Gyal Lo. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Welcome to the Perspective series for Payul. So I will just read out a short bio that I've made for you. Dr. Gyal Lo is a Tibetan educationist who left Tibet in December 2020, but continues to actively advocate to the field of education back home. Born in Amdo, he attended school in his home region and then got a master's from Northwestern University for Nationalities in China. He was appointed a full professorship at the Yunnan Normal University Institute for Studies in Education from 2017 to 2020. He had earlier come to Canada, where he now resides. He obtained his PhD degree in Educational Sociology at the University of Toronto. We are very thrilled to have you here, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Sure, sir. So before we proceed, sir, I wanted to ask you, you told me that you just had an audience with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So could you tell me what is going on in your head right now?
Yeah, it's a great moment. It's very different from 10 years ago when I was able to get a great opportunity to audience with His Holiness Dalai Lama. And today it's quite different because the situation has changed radically. In 2011, at that time, I was in a doctoral program during my study. And today, the way I'm thinking that it's very different because I took my mission back to the Tibet after I received my PhD in University of Toronto. So I got a chance to serve every possible way while in Yunnan Normal University. So unfortunately, they defeated me for the political climate, increasingly. That, I think, changed my life routine, I think. It's not a simple change. First, I left home society. The second, it became like a exile person who seeking the two levels of the life. One is life to strive to support my family. The second one, I wanted to continue my mission of establishing the foundation of the sociology of Tibet, which I accomplished about that level, I think. I feel like now almost be able to lay out the foundation of the Tibetan sociology. And then I also be able to present the two books that's focused on the sociology of Tibet. So that's the basic. I've sort of quite get to the emotional today, crying and presenting what I have done. Those books, and at the same time, got a chance to briefly mention about colonial boarding school in Tibet. Particularly the China forcefully keeping our age 4 to 6 kids in the boarding preschool. That's pretty much serious for our future. So that's I think that's a message. It's important, quite heavy, I think, to present to him, His Holiness Dalai Lama. And along the side, I also present the book, biographical book, which is the Gongtong Rinpoche, who served as a fellow with Panchen Rinpoche, 10th Panchen Rinpoche. And then after he took the full responsibility after Panchen Rinpoche passed away, and then he faced so much challenge and the political issues with him that he have to deal with it.
Yeah.
That part, why I spend the time on that bio book, because in our tradition, when they writing in the bio book, they're purely describing how they receive the religious education without mentioning social, political, cultural contribution to our nation. So I think this is there's a huge hole with his whole life if we don't put it into the words and then to transfer into the young generation. So I said it has a crucial meaning to present to His Holiness Dalai Lama today, because he thinks, the inside people also striving for our nation. Even young generation and old generation, the Lama, they cross the gender and the age. So that's a message for him. I think it's a gift to him. Yeah.
I'm sure it must have been a very memorable meeting this morning. So my first question to you about the colonial boarding schools that you've just mentioned, the report that was published last year revealed that over, as you said, 800,000 to almost 1 million children are in these schools, mostly against their wishes. Could you tell us why then parents are sending their kids to these state-run schools?
Yeah, it's obvious, very, very clear. The idea is we're under the colonial control. So in order to succeed in the colonizing Tibet from the roots, they see the education is a powerful tool to change, transform the nation, or to pull out the generation from their roots. So that's only the way they do. And then they establish school education, schools across Tibet. I think most of them are established during the 1979 to 1980 and 81 too, like those generation period. Even that is a result of our older generation's effort. Because the Benchen Rinpoche and other lamas generation, who Gongtang Rinpoche, all they emphasize to inherit our culture and the way of the life and identity, everything. Then the schools spread to all over the Tibetan society, almost everywhere. I think in 1982, 3, around that time, the school spread all over the Tibet, even in the village level. That's the affected a large number of our young generation at that time. But our people at that time had hesitated to send our kids to those schools. The local people at that time, they think this is not our school. For example, there's a story I can share with you. One day, the Chinese official went down to the village and asked the villagers to send their kids to school. And then the villager says, "Where is our schools?" "Yeah, quite there. We built a school for you." And then the villager answered like, "Oh, that you built your school there is not our school." So at that time we had that kind of
strong opinion
struggle in defining the education, whose education is. And then on top of this, our old generation, I think it's quite understandable, but at that time, they think every kid should be educated without knowing or without having the understanding of what kind of a school is. was, right? So they even Panchen Rinpoche and Kunton Rinpoche, those great masters inside Tibet, they encouraged people to send their kids to school. At that time, we don't know. Nobody did doing the research about how to analyze the content of the curriculum, how to define the school properly. So that's those older generations, under the older generations' encouragement, the school attendance got increased a lot. But the Chinese, they know what that means, sending their kids to the school. What are the consequences of the attending school? They know, but our people didn't know that part. This is a huge hole for us, that to turn our 3 generations in, it has no capacity. Fit neither Chinese society nor Tibetan society. So since I think 1997, 2000, around that time, when we fully aware that something wrong with our education, and then myself engaged very deeply, we realized that the core issue is with the curriculum, because our school textbooks are purely translated from Chinese textbooks. That means they're using our language to teach Chinese culture to our young generation. So that we realize that's a problem. School education problem with the curriculum and the content of the textbook. So then I fully engaged, try to change that systematically. Well, then we did the project, and we did the research, training conference, all kind of related stuff. So published the 2 books. Those are books based on the oral culture. We record the oral story that's fully related child's story and the culture. And then we translated that, edited that, put into the textbook. But the textbook, first time we published, printed many. And then we distribute all Tibetan regions. After that, distributed the book, we invite those teachers from those schools. We distribute the book. And then those teachers are crying, saying, this is what we need. But why until today? This should be at the beginning. Why today? And then during the training conference, I'm in charge of the entire program at that time. And then I explained that. Sorry, it's not my fault, not your fault either. So just by the time we only realized this is a huge issue. Now, then we were having this program. So the program went well, and the teachers are crying. They're saying, oh, I feel like now our education on the highway, if we teach this book. But before, it's like a rough road. We're on the rough road.
We didn't know then.
Yeah, we didn't know this. So at that time, we simply accepted that's a Tibetan school education. That's quite significant, I think. So it's without knowing the harm of the school education. So we accepted that this is Tibetan school education. We counted that. But unfortunately, from 2013, it's turned into the Xi Jinping's policy furthered those education, and then we solved the solving the problem we had before. Then before I left in Tibet, I told all those old friends and the colleagues, I said, we don't have school education anymore. Even that's the colonial boarding school. But now, that school, the rule of that school completely shift into the pure colonial education in Tibetan society. That's the shift of the rule of the school education. Yes. So I think it's China lied the international community. Is saying we peacefully liberated the Tibet, and then we developed the society, educated the young generations. It almost became a truth. The line became a truth. It's quite a funny story, I think. But now it's a time with our understanding, the theoretical understanding from the educational discipline and the sociological discipline. We realized from both perspectives, this is a pure colonial education system that's pulling out our young generation from the cultural root. Yeah.
So you used the word residential schools, which is also extensively covered in the Tibet Action Institute report that was revealed last year. So the report compares the residential schools built for the indigenous people in the US and Canada, but in Tibet it is happening right now in modern Tibet. So even though as we compare the parallels, what do you think is different in the structure for these Chinese colonial boarding schools that are in Tibet?
I think the time is different, and the government is different, and the way of the treatment is different, but the consequences will be the same. Why I'm saying that? Because that's the old issue over. Even Canada, they officially apologized number of the time, but China intentionally continuing, even pushing the situation more worse. This is the one. The second thing is the education, the complete shift, the role of the school education. Before we have even using our language to teach Chinese culture to our young generation, but now it's completely locked out. For example, from the preschool, boarding preschool issue to the higher education, there as an institution like the boarding preschool and the higher education institute, they all ran by themselves, controlled by Chinese, and ran by Chinese and taught by Chinese. That's different. That's different. For example, in Canada, you cannot see that anymore, right? But China is continuing. Now it's the same as they think. Well, I don't care what you think. International community think. We're powerful enough. We will do whatever we think is good. Yeah, that's the issue problem there. So, on top of that, our people inside Tibet got systematically under the control. This never had before. Even cultural revolution, they destroy the material environment. That's fine. We can resume that, right? Very easily within the 10 years. But the situation now, what's happening there, it's a sort of psychological revolution happening. That's if China succeeds at this, then we won't be able to resume our culture, I think. The different It's the Cultural Revolution. After the Cultural Revolution, we simply resumed our culture. But after this period, I think it is very hard to resume, revive the culture, because it's been completely washed from a psychological foundation, and then you have no idea, no root in your psychological realm. So there's no chance, no room, no basis for you to resume the culture. So I think this is causes my deep worries now. I cried today while arguing with His Holiness Dalai Lama. I know what's going on there inside, and then we outside the people giving hope on him. So, it's the age is old enough there, and then it's a time for exile people, Tibetan people, to take every possible responsibility from his shoulder. I think that's the time for us. That's why I cried a lot today. He is now often encouraging our people. He will live until 15, 20 years, and then he will do whatever he can. But I think to me, the message is it's a time for us to take every possible responsibility. That makes me so cry today. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was a very moving, exchange of ideas. I think from inside Tibet, you've come, and so many Tibetans from inside Tibet look up to His Holiness the Dalai Lama here in exile in Dharamsala. So as you have already mentioned, I think the findings expose the cruelty of the Chinese government and its domination over the Tibetan language. I think the most important aspect is the language that the Chinese government is trying to eradicate inside Tibet. My question to you then is, so we in exile know that the Tibetan language has been targeted through and through by the Chinese state. Can you explain to us why the state, as you said, post-70s, 1970s, why are they bent upon now eradicating Tibetan language from the primary schools for children as young as 6?
The Chinese, they have their own proverbs. When you pull the grass, better to dig out the root. That's a philosophy or proverb they are practicing on us through the education. They wanted to pull out, completely uproot from the culture. And then that's what makes us no chance, no base, no ability to revise the culture. And also, nobody wanted to practice it. In the future, I think, if those kids who are in age 4 to 6 kids in a boarding preschool, when they grow up, I think, pretty sure they won't be able to practice it, and also they don't want to practice it. I think, because if the Chinese successfully educate them on their way, then for sure they're not gonna be able to practice the language. And maybe worst things is they don't want to practice the language. Yeah, that's the worst situation going to happen. Even within 30 years, I think. Yeah, this because China puts the boarding preschool education as a part of a compulsory education. So that policy, no one can escape from the policy. So that means every kid, age 4 to 6 kids, has to be in their colonial boarding school. So that means they will educate our young generation the way they design. It's not designed for us. So that's the dangers, you know. Even generation 2, 3 generation gone, I think it's a civilization is practiced by people, developed by people, and informed by people. So those kind of kids who from boarding preschool and in the future, none of them can do those things. Yeah.
I think that's a very intense topic to talk about.
Yeah.
So I think because of our time constraint, I think the last question I have for you is a personal one. I am a third generation Tibetan. My grandparents had come from Tibet and lived here till their demise. So I personally do not have the wherewithal to think about what the children in Tibet are facing at the moment, what their upbringing is, how their education is going on. So my question to you is, how can the world be told about this deeply oppressive policy, and how as we as exile can contribute, to show solidarity with those inside Tibet who are struggling with this oppressive policy?
Yeah, I think China thinks that they have power to do all they want, all they plan, their intention, but they don't know one thing that they can't achieve it. Because there's something that the spirituality with our mental states, that's not the tangible things. Materialism has nothing to do with that. So our people, our nation has a rich spirituality with our mental states throughout the generations. So China has nothing to do with it. That spiritualities cross borders in continental borders, regional borders, and also even generations. So that's the thing that's tied us, no matter how far you are, tie the people as belong to one another, having the same belonging, the sense of the same belonging. The spirituality has so much power, but the intangible. But China has nothing to do with that. They know now they are they're increasing their awareness of the power of the spirituality with Tibet that we have. But they don't have no idea. They have no idea how to treat that. No matter how far you're in Canada, Europe, North America, South America, no matter, that thing is tied us together as a Tibetan. So, on the other hand, the essential element, which is the language that can describe the way our spirituality approach. So that's the power we have now. I think sometime in the postmodern society, that power is the new power. That is something machine cannot replace it. And economic power cannot replace it. Military power can't replace it too. So that's something I think we needed to think about, our young generation from outside. So how to use this power, great power, to tie us together more inside and outside the Tibet people. It's one thing. The other thing is, I clearly see that our third generation in exile society, we have a young generation has a good quality and a strong passion for our nation. That's a very important sign, because China educates our generation without teaching our culture, but at the same time raising their Han nationalism. That's also raised Tibetan nationalism. So the nationalist idea of the nationalist, if inside outside have a interaction in the future somehow, that's I think it's the huge hope for our nation. I think.
I think Tibetans have the power of truth against the power of machine from China. I think on that note, Dr. Gyal Lo, I want to thank you for your, giving us the time, and thank you so much for
My pleasure.
Having this very interesting intellectual conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.